Blog Talk Radio.
Welcome to another edition of the most intellectual program on Blog Talk Radio since 2006. This is Progressive Conservatism, therapy for the partisan soul, and unlike Oprah, we recommend books here you can actually learn from instead of the usual mainstream tripe. I'm Mark Radulich, political shrink, and your host for the next hour. I'm delighted and honored to have on the show the great professor from Baylor University and author of my personal Bible, The Rise of Christianity, Rodney Stark. He'll be here to discuss his two new books, which I've just finished reading, The Victory of Reason and Cities of God, the real story of how Christianity became an urban movement and conquered Rome. He'll also be here to discuss other issues of religion, history, and sociology-related topics. Also on the show, I'll be talking to 411 Mania Politics Zone editor and author of the weekly column, The Political Universe, Jason Easley. We'll discuss why 411 rules and Air America drools, and a host of other topics as well. That should be a guess. And it wouldn't be an edition of Progressive Conservatism without the much ballyhooed report. All of this, plus your phone calls, only on Progressive Conservatism Live. First, let me give out a few numbers. If you want to call into the show, the number is 646-915-8862. You can also instant message me at markkind1976, MARKKIND 1976. While we're waiting for our guest of honor, let me tell you how I happened upon reading the Rodney Stark canon of books. A couple of years ago, as I've mentioned many, many times before, after 9/11, I gave up a lot of my more childish things, one of which was video games, and I started reading pretty vociferously about terrorism, world events, history, so on and so forth. And when after I'd been reading for a good long time and I started to get away a little bit from the Sean Hannity and Coulter type books, of which I was reading a lot of at the time, I began to get interested in a variety of other topics, and I would kind of do my own summer class that I would teach myself. I would pick a topic of any interest, and I would go and get 4 or 5 books on that particular topic, and I would just teach it to myself. One summer was post-Bolshevik Revolution Russian history. Another one was, and to explain this, I wasn't really brought up with any kind of religion. My dad is actually a devout atheist, hates Christianity with a passion, and my mom was a lapsed Jew. Still is, as a matter of fact. So I never got bar mitzvahed, never baptized, never anything having to do with religion. And the few times that I've been to a religious congregation was when I went with my grandparents to Mass, or I started celebrating a few Passovers and Hanukkahs with my friends in the neighborhood who were devoutly Jewish. Well, his parents at least were devoutly Jewish. He, not so much. But anyway, so any religious upbringing I had was always, third party. So one summer, while everyone was doing their thing, I decided that I needed to know what this whole Christianity thing was all about. Now, I've heard the various varieties of Christianity. There's your Protestantism, your Lutheranism, your Catholics, your Baptists, your evangelical, so on and so forth. And certainly, shortly after this, the word evangelical became pretty important in terms of knowing your politics. So, not knowing the difference between any of these particular labels, these denominations of Christianity, hell, I think at one time I didn't even know which came first, Catholicism or Christianity. I really had no clue. What little I had known about the Christian faith, I'd actually learned in a history class about the Middle Ages, which started with the fall of Rome. And much to my shock, I showed up for class one day, and the teacher says, "Okay, we're going to talk. We can't talk about the Middle Ages without talking about how Rome fell, and you can't talk about how Rome fell without discussing the history of Jesus Christ." Well, that was news to me. So one summer, I picked up a series of books about the history of Christianity without actually having to read the Bible, which I didn't think was important. One of those books that I picked up was The Rise of Christianity by Rodney Stark. And The Rise of Christianity was different from any other book that I had read in that it was a sociology book. It was a sociology book, and it spoke about what exactly was the attraction to Christianity from a sociological point of view in the people at that time who were living in the Middle East in the Roman Empire. And I really fell in love with this book because it's very easy for someone to say, don't do this. I say this about parenting all of the time, that setting up arbitrary rules and not explaining why that rule is in effect, why are you asking this of people, isn't very effective. So, had limited exposure to church and, in the Bible and whatnot, I didn't know why these things existed. And to me, that's important, to have an answer to the question why. I'm reading through this book, and it explains why the rules of Christianity are what they are, what their total effect is supposed to be, and why people were attracted to it. And it started to make sense to me. The questions of abortion, the question of self-control, self-restraint were of paramount importance in Christianity versus some of the other religions that I had read about. So I was reading through this book, and I really, really, really enjoyed it. And then that attracted me to start reading more of Rodney Stark's book, and I became a huge fan of his. And to this day, I now refer to The Rise of Christianity, as I said in the intro, as my personal Bible. It really is. It's definitely one of those books that after I read it, it had a profound effect on my life in the way that I conducted myself among people, the way that I thought about particular issues. A lot of my politics, as a matter of fact, is shaped by a lot of what I've read from this book. While I'm not as socially conservative as those ready to throw Rudy Giuliani and John McCain over the falls, I would think that to the degree that I can be a social conservative, came out of what I was able to pick from this book because it made sense to me. I invite you all to actually read that book if you can. It's written in very plain language. If you can tolerate at all any kind of history or sociological text, it's probably one of the best books I've read in that genre. His new book, and we're still waiting, his new book, Cities of God, The Real Story of How Christianity Became an Urban Movement and Conquered Rome, is actually, to me, is like a sequel to the rise of Christianity, and that, again, both of which sought to answer why exactly this particular religion, and at the time, Christianity, not a big religion, especially in the Roman Empire, had lots of competition. Why did this one beat out the rest? Often, Constantine is named as the reason why Christianity took over the Western world, but there was a great many years in between the existence of Christ and Constantine naming Christianity as the imperial religion. So what happened in between that time? First book, Rise of Christianity, talks about the sociological attraction. This one talks about how it spread from Galilee across the empire, and it's done so, and this is very different from any other book that I've read in the sense that he uses statistical data to back up his assertions. What most people will do is they'll come up with a hypothesis and they'll show through different historical events proof that their hypothesis is true. And it is extremely subjective in that someone can come up with just as equal an hypothesis and support it with different evidence. What makes his stand out is that he's not going on just historical evidence. He's using statistical data derived from history. I mean, he cites a number of different studies that actually did the counting. In fact, the very last chapter in this, Why Historians Should Count, is, I think, a great indicator of where he would like to see history go. Because all too often, and he actually cites an example from his book, people will read things, infer a topic from that, and then, if it makes enough sense to people, very rarely will anyone then come across and say, well, I don't think that's true. So what he does is he takes the data and instead of making a hypothesis based on preconceived opinions, he actually just writes based on his data. So throughout almost every chapter, there are several hypotheses per chapter pertaining to, did, for example, Christianity take off more in port cities or more inland cities? And you'll see throughout the book that Christianity, for a number of different reasons, was more of a port city religion than it was an inland city religion prior to Constantine. And he backs this up with actually recorded data. I don't think census, and I don't remember reading anything about a census, but inscriptions, whatever records had been kept. I mean, people who actually sat down and did the nitty-gritty work of counting the numbers. Another assertion that he makes in the book is what about a city lended itself to being accepted by Christianity, and one of those things was whether or not there were temples to Isis, or I'm going to probably mispronounce this, but I think the name is Cybele. Hang on. Yeah, Cybele, Cybele. What happens is that what he hypothesizes is that if there had been temples to either Isis or Cybele preceding the arrival of Christianity, because of the nature of those two religions, it lended itself to support Christianity moving in and being accepted. So in other words, it's kind of like saying we are Baptist, and we've already been Baptist, we already go to a Baptist church, and then evangelicals come in, and they say, well, what is great about evangelicalism versus being a Baptist? Well, there's already a preconceived notion of what we find to be an acceptable religion, and therefore it's an easier conversion from Baptist to, say, evangelical. Well, same thing here. It's an easier conversion from Isis or Cybele to Christianity than, say, whether or not there was devout paganism. Which is another interesting thing about this book, is that he cites a few other authors in both this book and in The Victory of Reason, which is about how Christianity led to the rise of capitalism and eventually Western dominance. what he says in that book, as well as Cities of God, is he actually cites authors like Jonathan Kirsch, who wrote God Against the Gods, and Jared Diamond, who's also one of my particularly favorite authors, who wrote Guns, Germs, and Steel. And in both cases, they're touting a secular agenda for why things are the way that they are. And they, much like many writers who are varying degrees of hostile towards Christianity, what they'll do is they'll cite all of these reasons that have nothing to do with Christianity for the reason that it did or did not take off, or what kind of effect it had on Western civilization. For example, in Cities of God, he counters Jonathan Kirsch's assertion in God Against the Gods that Emperor Julian was trying to restore tolerance to the empire after Constantine had made Christianity the imperial religion. Now, Stark actually cites actual evidence that this was not the case. And then he goes to the data, that during Constantine's reign, there was actually more pluralism and tolerance of a variety of religions, despite the fact that Constantine had made Christianity the imperial religion. This goes against almost the entire book, God Against the Gods, that Kirsch wrote. And he names him by name. He says, this guy, hostile towards religion, says X, Y, Z, here's why he's wrong, and then gives you the data derived from countless studies. In The Victory of Reason, he starts off with the assertion made by Jared Diamond as well as many others that geography and proximity to domesticable animals, such as horses, pigs, chickens, so forth, were the reason that the Western civilization took off versus African, or South American, or even Asian. Though in that book he would say that the Western societies and the Asian societies were somewhat similar. But what Stark says is that's true. That helped, obviously. Having soil that produced the better food versus the weaker food, or having more domesticable animals in one area versus another, certainly did lend itself to the betterment of said societies. But he counters that Christian religion played a more important role than geography or proximity to certain animals possibly could have. Now, I remember I actually gave my dad this book to read because, he also was a big fan of Jared Diamond and, other secular writers. And I gave him The Victory of Reason, and he sent me in all these questions about, well, what about this, what about this, what about this, which if I had Rodney Stark on the show, which I don't know if he's coming on now, I would have loved to have asked him. But in any case, what his assertion is in The Victory of Reason is that Christianity, more so than any other religion, lent itself to the rise of science and reason, because in Christianity you can naturally question the nature of God, whereas the other religions, either questioning the nature of God was wrong and was a heresy and such, or the nature of God just is. It doesn't lend itself to questioning. A lot of the Eastern religions, this has been the accusation that because in their religion God just is, it doesn't lend itself to any kind of intellectual curiosity or reasoning, and therefore other things do not develop. Now, someone might call in, and again, if you want to call in and partake in this discussion, the number is 646-915-8862. What happens is that in religions that don't promote questioning and that you just accept, what Stark proposes is that part of the reason why okay, well, actually, let me go back a step. Well, I was talking about the difference between science and technology. Now, someone may call in and say, well, prior to Christianity, obviously, in Western civilization, there was technology. Certainly. There were all kinds of inventions, all kinds of technology, and he's saying that science as scholarship didn't exist prior to Christianity. That, sure, people invented, nature abhors a vacuum and all of that, and I think, what is it? I think need is the mother of all invention. Produced, as I keep saying, invention and technology, but not scholarly science. In other words, you invent things to satisfy a need, but as far as someone sitting down and saying, well, why does this happen? Or as Bill Cosby once asked, why is there air? You really didn't have people doing serious, accountable, verifiable, reproducible science. And for those of you that don't know, you see in the news all the time various scientific studies that say this, that, and the other thing. I've done a few of them on the show. In order for something to be verified in science, or for, say, let's say, a drug to exist on the market to cure disease, like Iran a few weeks ago said they had a herbal cure for AIDS. Well, look, they can say anything they want, but whatever science you produce in, say, California needs to be reproduced somewhere else in the country or in the world. This was part of the problem with I believe it was the South Korean stem cell research, is that it wasn't reproducible. In other words, if you do it in one place, somewhere separately has to be able to do the same thing in order for it to be verified and then accepted and then exposed to the population. That in and of itself defines science as opposed to invention or technology. This is what he's saying came out of Christianity, and only Christianity, was that first you have the ability to question, then you have the questioning itself, and the questioning develops into science and blah, blah, blah. So part of what he's saying is that a lot of the great inventions that came out of Western society might not have existed purely on need alone, but came out of the fact that science was developing. And with science, then came the better inventions and the need to expand, and some would say this was a bad thing, but imperialize the rest of the world for one reason or another, and thus the spread of Christianity. So, interesting books. Would have loved to have actually spoken with Rodney Stark about them, but seems that we have miscommunicated, and no Rodney Stark on today's show. But, unless I'm lucky and he actually calls in. But I do recommend Cities of God, the real story of how Christianity became an urban movement and conquered Rome. And I also still recommend The Victory of Reason. Don't remember the subtitle of it. And I also recommend The Rise of Christianity, as I think what happens is people hear religion, they talk about religion, and the first thing that comes to mind are the evangelicals in this world, the people who are radical, the people who are certainly some of the more modern debates have been Darwinism versus, oh God, what's the name of the ridiculous one? I can't remember the name of it now, but it's where God created. I wish I remember it. It's where God created science in the world, and there's all kinds of reasons for why this. Intellectual design. That's it. God created the world, and because it all works, it lends itself to proof that God had created it. In other words, the reasons why things work the way they do in this world is out of design. Not the Big Bang Theory, but thank you. I had someone write in saying it's the Big Bang. No, it's intellectual design is what I was thinking of, but thank you. That basically God created things so that they would work properly. And, of course, people in the science community, I don't know which one they react worse to, the intellectual design people or the people that say, again, people writing in trying to help me out here. Thank you for trying to help. I appreciate that. I don't know which one they react worse to, whether or not global warming exists, or whether or not evolution and Darwinism exists. Both of which give people who are more science-minded a sour taste in their mouth when it comes to religion. And unfortunately, there are more things that lend itself to intellectual scholarship and religion than I think what gets talked about in the media. So this is why I really like Stark's books, because it takes sort of the stupidity out of the argument. You know, it takes away from this juvenile thought of, well, if God didn't do it, then it's not worth talking about, and I don't want to be exposed to it. One of the things that comes out of Stark's books is how valuable Christianity is, and he says it without having to go to the fire and brimstone topics of, you know, it's good because it is, and if you don't think that way, then you're a heretic and you're going to hell. There's serious scholarship here, and there's serious consideration of the fact that Christianity is valuable. It's one of the reasons why I got turned on to it in the first place. So, with that, again, I recommend any one of Stark's books, and he's written about a dozen of them, I think. Okay. If he calls in, folks, I'll probably stop the show and do the interview that I had set up. But unfortunately, I'll just pull back the curtain here. I had plugged this in 2 weeks ago because I knew John wasn't going to be on the show. And I figured, okay, well, that'll give me an opportunity to do something different instead of the usual way that we conduct the show. And I figured, let me get an author on. I spoke to him. We exchanged emails, gave him the phone number, explained to him how it works. You know, this is unfortunately what happens. Now, if this were regular terrestrial radio, I would have people making sure that he, calling him, or he would call the show, and then they would make sure that he was on before I actually went on the air. And then if he wasn't, then I'd have to go with whatever, the B schedule was going to be. But this is Blog Talk Radio, seat of the pants. That's the way the Internet is. Fully prepared to accept that. And unfortunately, instead of an interview with Rodney Stark, I did a very, very long review of his books. So with that, something I'm a little bit more familiar with and a little bit more fun on this show, certainly my favorite part, the report.
Chicken Boo, what's the matter with you? You don't act like the other chickens do. You wear a disguise to look like human guys, but you're not a man, you're a chicken boo.
WorldPoultry.net presents the report. I knew someone would be excited out there. All right. Jamaica begins training small poultry farmers. The Jamaica Agricultural Society, in partnership with Alcoa Foundation, on Tuesday launched a $1.2 million project aimed at providing development support training for small poultry farmers in Clarendon. Janet Pullen, the JAS's project coordinator, said the project was timely given the growing demand for poultry meat and the need to increase production. Senator Norman Grant, president of the JAS, commented, "Agriculture is the catalyst for present and future development of any nation, and it is always commendable to witness an organization that embraces the concept of sustainability. The program will last 8.5 months and will benefit 100 farmers in the parish. A model state-of-the-art poultry will also be built on the Denbigh Showgrounds as part of the project." Now, this is interesting in the sense that for many, many years, especially in the Caribbean, they existed as part of other people's empires, and they had agribusiness communities meant to supplement the empires, and they really didn't have much of their own domestic industry. And then, of course, that all fell apart, and the countries had to rebuild from scratch, and many of them, unfortunately, went into sort of an isolationist mode, pushing out people and countries who were there who might have helped the country develop in the post-World War II era. So it doesn't surprise me that, after years of that sort of thing happening, now you have countries who are starting to refocus on their own economy and their environment and trying to produce their own food. Many countries are sort of at the mercy of Western civilization in the sense that they buy a lot of food from us. So it was one of the things that I thought would change after GATT, the General Agreement on Trade and Tariffs, was passed. So I thought it was interesting when I read this about Jamaica's training small poultry farmers. It also reminded me of the project that I'm involved in with Hillsborough Community College. You know, as I've mentioned many times on the show before, we have a foreign exchange student staying here, Fifi, as you might recall. And she's not just here for the sake of just, you know, learning a trade and then going home. She's actually a part of a program that's supposed to combat brain drain. In other words, she learns a skill that she then has to take back to her own country, and then she has to live there and work there for 2 years. So that's what this reminds me of, that there's a refocus on countries who are going to sustain their own economy without having to depend and, again, be at the mercy of Western powers. And that, without Reverend John making a lot of sound effects, kind of missed that, as a matter of fact, is the BUCGAW report. Okay. I have a caller here, 724-465. You're on Progressive Conservatism Live. How you doing?
Hey, Mark.
How you doing?
This is Jason.
Jason!
Yeah.
All right.
So I am your 1 o'clock. I am here on time. What's on your mind?
All right. Good to have you on the show, Jason.
It's good to be here.
Let me first give you a proper introduction.
Oh, please. Where's my music?
Your music?
Yeah, you told me I have music, man. Where's my music?
Oh, well.
Do I have pyro music? Come on.
Here we go. All right.
There. Now I'm pumped. Now I'm ready to go.
Yeah, I wish I could have had pyro there to blow something up. Really,
yeah,
give a proper introduction.
But the pyro would have been really nice. I'm used to the pyro every time I walk into a room.
Do you?
I demand it, yeah. I like to make the proper entrance.
Outstanding. All right. So everyone knows who it is we're talking to here.
Yep.
As I said at the top of the show, this is the 411 Mania Politics Zone editor and the Political Universe writer.
Yeah, and your boss.
And my boss, Jason Easley. You had to throw that one in there, huh?
Yeah. Oh, I couldn't resist.
So how's it going today, Jason?
Oh, everything's going good. I mean, you know, we're pretty much snowed in up here in beautiful southwestern Pennsylvania. There's whiteout conditions, a wind chill of 7. You know, it's a good day.
Yeah, it's really, really cold down here in Tampa, Florida.
Like what, 60?
About. It's a breezy 60 degrees today.
Yeah, I mean, if we had 60 right now, we'd be out in shorts sunbathing.
That's funny. I actually walked outside, and like I said, it's about 60 degrees. I told my wife, dress warm. It's kind of cold out there.
Yeah, I mean, every time I go to Maryland and D.C., I laugh myself hysterically because it'll be 45 degrees and people are bundling up.
Mm-hmm. That was the funny thing about moving down here is that my first whole year, if it was like this, I was still outside in shorts, and about a year later, I've become what my
yeah, you adjust to the weather, and you're like in a parka when it's 52. You know?
Mm-hmm. I remember those days, and believe me, I don't miss New York for that reason.
Yeah,
you guys keep the cold weather.
Horrible. This has been going on. We had one day break 32 degrees in the last 3 weeks.
Wow.
Yeah, this is just awful. People around here now, everybody just looks at each other and growls on the street. When is it going to go away?
And this is why Progressive Conservatism Live beams from Tampa and not New York.
Well, yeah. Well, you know, you would be in the media capital of the world, New York.
Exactly. Not too far away from Rush Limbaugh down there in West Palm Beach.
Well, yeah. What kind of guests do you get in Tampa? Do you get like the Musketeers?
That's Orlando.
You get Tampa Bay Devil Rays players to come on?
Yeah, we'll get cigar makers.
The Devil Rays players are, so.
Okay. One of the things
let's get into politics.
Yes, one of the things I wanted to bring Jason on the show for is news broke this week that Air America finally went bankrupt.
Yep.
Al Franken is now off the air. I think Janine Garofalo's gone too, and all they got left as far as any kind of name people are Randy Rhoads, which you only know her if you listen to liberal radio.
No.
I liked Randy. I think the only other name left on there is Jerry Springer still on there, or they finally threw him off?
Springer's off.
Springer's off. Okay.
Yeah.
I actually liked his show, and I used to listen to him in Miami.
Yeah. Jerry really does belong back in politics. He's pretty much ruined himself doing his syndicated show, but his heart and soul really is political.
I don't know. I mean, I listened to his show, and the problem is, aside from his show wasn't as angry as the other shows on Air America. I mean, let me go through it. I never listened to the morning shows just because whenever I got into my car, I would listen to something else. But I typically gave the Rachel Maddow Chuck D show a chance. That was terrible.
That's an understatement, by the way.
What was that?
Terrible would be a compliment.
I mean, I'm not entirely sure where Jason stands politically, but I was open-minded enough to give Air America a chance, and I'll get to some of the shows I actually liked in a second. And I'm a big fan of Public Enemy. I loved Public Enemy.
Yeah.
Used to love Chuck D.
Chuck D's great in his own right, just speaking.
Mm-hmm.
The problem, I thought, was Rachel Maddow.
Yeah, Rachel Maddow, to me, summed up what was wrong with the entire network is that, and again, I don't understand how people can listen to Michael Savage for this reason either, is I listen to talk radio to learn stuff and to be entertained, not to be screamed at incessantly. Yeah. And the elite sarcasm that I got out of Rachel Maddow and the other broad that was on the show would drive me nuts. And then Chuck D would say something insane. There was angry, sarcastic, insane in that order.
It was great train wreck radio.
Oh, it really was.
I mean, not since the high, heady days of the David Lee Roth morning show. We've seen something quite that bad. No, actually, the Air America, I didn't listen to it that much. I gave it a shot like you did, but I can't stand Franken.
No, I
can't stand Franken. Franken is the arrogant, whiny liberal that everybody just annoys everyone. And I'm a Democrat, and I find him terribly annoying. And the rest of the programming, except for Randy Rhoads, who was boring, was pretty bad. It was all the same way. It was all just this one. It was far left programming, and I think it was launched at the wrong time. First of all,
well, it was launched as a Kerry surrogate. I mean, it was essentially what Hezbollah is to Iran is what Air America was to the Kerry campaign.
But the problem was, Democrats are apathetic and ambivalent to John Kerry. No one really actually liked John Kerry.
No, I keep saying, and God help the Democrats if they pull this again in 2008.
Yeah,
Kerry was the safe vote.
Anytime you see the word electable beside a candidate, that's a compromised candidate of a party afraid to take a risk.
Yeah, I've been saying that about John McCain, is that I'm afraid that's exactly what people are going to say about him and then promptly lose.
McCain is lining up just so many endorsements inside the Senate, the fundraising, the evangelicals. He's going to be tough to beat. McCain is the inside candidate.
Right now, there are so many this is what John and I have been talking about, the Reverend John, who isn't with us today. What we've been saying is that if they put a moderate enough candidate in there that can peel votes away, peel the moderate portion of the votes away, and peel away some Democrats who aren't afraid that you're going to put in someone who's, a social conservative. Yeah. Then you don't need the evangelicals.
The problem is you'll never, ever get you through the primaries. Evangelicals turn out in mass in the Republican primaries.
Well, with California being now before South Carolina, there's a chance of it.
Because the California Republicans are almost Democrats in a lot of southern states.
Right. Getting back to Air America, that was part of the problem with it, is that it was strictly there to get Kerry elected. They failed.
Well, it was a far left
for a variety of reasons.
I'm far left and far right in the long-term strategy doesn't seem to be very profitable.
No, I don't
cater to the extremes.
Well, I think in a lot of cases they were preaching to the choir. And again, I listened to, Rush Limbaugh is very entertaining, but I think the shows where I actually learned something are the Mark Levin show, who is angry in his own right, but at least I learn a lot from his show. Bill Bennett in the morning I actually learn a lot from. And, again, anyone that can turn me on the
how to gamble.
Really
don't take it towards him playing blackjack. Is that what you guys stuff he teaches?
No, no, he's not that bad. So any radio program that I can actually learn from, the O'Reilly Factor is another good one.
His radio program, I actually caught myself last weekend. I wasn't paying attention to where I was on the radio dial. And he was talking about Al Gore, and he helped you win the Oscar, and believing in global warming. And I thought, well, this isn't too bad. Then he said he was Bill O'Reilly, and I was like, what the? Because his radio show and his TV show are a bit different.
Yeah, his radio show, he's a little bit more looser.
He's not. I thought you were going to say lucid.
The problem with his television show is exactly what was spoken about between, I think it was Chris Matthews and Jon Stewart, and that is when you're on TV, and again, I don't know if you got involved with 401 because you were at one time a wrestling fan, but
many moons ago.
What makes a wrestling character successful is the ability to turn their personality on from about 4 or 5 to 10.
Yeah.
And that translates through the television and garners interest and viewership and so forth. It's the same thing in politics. Your character has to translate through the screen. So O'Reilly on camera is more of a character than he is on the radio.
Yeah, I mean, there's a degree of personal charisma involved, which I'm always writing about personal charisma in candidates because it's vital. I mean, there has to be a one-to-one connection established, whether you're talking about radio, television, or political candidacies. If people don't feel like the person coming into their living room is connecting with them, they're going to shut you off.
Exactly, which I don't understand why Keith Olbermann still has a show. But that's
Oberman has a show because it's a different format, and it just kind of fits in with the Daily Show, and it's sort of fun. It's not too heavy.
Okay, I think I tried Countdown once about the time that O'Reilly was having problems with the sexual harassment.
I could give you something on that, but you'd probably get thrown off the air.
This is Blog Talk Radio. I don't know getting thrown off on nothing.
Well, you know, you probably, I don't know. There are content standards for Blog Talk Radio, right?
Yeah, let's not go there on segment.
Yeah, I can come back and do a segment on O'Reilly's sexual harassment. I mean, I have the transcripts.
Please don't. I've read them, and I don't like romance novels. So.
Well, that's not even romance. That's some sort of cheap dime store graphic porn.
Yeah, I remember that now.
Back to Air America, as I take your hosting roles right away from you.
Please do. I'm tired. Progressive Conservatism featuring Jason Easley. Go.
Yeah, I'm just hijacking your show. I'm coming on. It's my show now. You know, and have your column in this Thursday. You know, now be gone. But no, actually, with Air America, the real problem was it did cater too much to a certain type of liberal. It basically excluded moderates. And if you're going to do any sort of media format, you can't shut out half to three-quarters of your audience.
Right. And
but at the end of the day, it comes down to selling advertising. And they just didn't sell enough ads.
No. I mean, like I said, going back to their initial thing was to get Kerry elected, and so they existed like any other socialist enterprise. You know, people just kept donating and throwing money into this thing because its sole purpose in life was to get them elected. They failed, and then they tried to become a radio station, and they made some changes. They dumped Chuck D. They brought on Springer. Just going through the shows, Al Franken's show wasn't entertaining.
No,
it was boring. This thing like the oi 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 thing, and I'm like, wow, what are you, a vaudeville act from 20, 30 years ago? Forget it. That's not going to work. Randy Rhoads I actually liked a lot. Yeah. And Randy Rhoads I think was an educational show. The problem with Randy Rhoads was the same thing, the same problem I have with Michael Savage, and that is don't yell at me while the show is on. Yeah,
I honestly think they gave Randy Rhoads a 3-hour slot, if I remember correctly, and they should have cut her down. Because if you give her in smaller doses, she's very informative and entertaining. But by like the middle of the second hour, she was just ranting.
Yeah.
And that's too much time.
And I remember the day after the elections, she had the nerve to get on there and go, people are calling in going, I'm sorry, Randy, we tried. And she's screaming at her listeners. And why Kerry didn't get elected. Not enough of you voted and blah, blah, blah. And I'm sitting there like, why would anyone want to listen to this program?
Why Kerry didn't get elected is because he's a horrible candidate.
That's besides the point.
It's the same thing like with Al Gore in Florida in 2000. People just need to let it go.
Mm-hmm. Yeah,
absolutely. He ran a terrible campaign. When you have the greatest resource available on the campaign stump at President Clinton, who, if your numbers can go up before, during, and after a sex scandal, you have a powerful force there on your side. He should have had President Clinton out there in every state. Yeah, I mean, that might have been – he only needed to swing a little bit of vote. Mm-hmm. And that might have done the trick. I mean, and that plus, if you win your home state of Tennessee, you win the election. You just – like, he didn't campaign in Tennessee or West Virginia.
No, and quite frankly, if you can't win your own state, you don't deserve to be president.
Yeah, I mean, well, that's the question with Hillary Clinton. Where is her home state?
Well, right now her state is New York, and she did win a second term, and it'll be interesting to see if she can pull off a victory in New York, especially if Giuliani ends up winning the primaries, which, again, he didn't have much of a shot in hell before, but now that California is voting to move up its primary.
Yeah, I mean that's a lot.
Chance.
That's a lot of delegates, but he's going to really struggle. He's going to really struggle in the non-blue states.
Mm-hmm.
He's going to really have, because here's what Romney's going to slam him for being immoral, and McCain's going to slam him for no foreign policy experience. See, Giuliani's numbers are really high right now because he hasn't been negative advertised against yet. But when he starts to get hammered from all sides, those numbers are going to fall off the table. And when you look at where the money and the insiders are going, they're all going to McCain. I mean, Giuliani. He's
going to be a tough candidate to beat, but he.
I mean, it's looking like the Republicans and the Republican Party has a long history of rewarding loyal soldiers, and McCain's been a loyal soldier.
That he has, and that's what makes him one of the tougher candidates to beat.
You know, if Giuliani would be a perfect third-party candidate, he'd be a great third-party candidate.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, he has enough of the liberal social values along with conservatism on the other issues that he would be a fantastic third-party candidate. He'd even be a great Democratic candidate. Yeah, trying to get through the Republican primaries, that's a tall task, especially when you choose to blow off the social conservative gathering in Florida this weekend.
Mm-hmm. Well, this is what we've been saying all along, is that as the primaries stood, Iowa, New Hampshire, South Carolina, Giuliani didn't have a shot in hell.
Yeah.
With California being moved, Florida being moved, now you've got some of the, as John calls them, the hazy shade of pink states being moved ahead of South Carolina. Giuliani stands a better shot. And as I said in my column, which is going to be more important to the voters out there, your social values or your ability to deal with China, Iran at all?
Well, and I think when you bring that topic up, Giuliani has no foreign policy experience, and there's McCain, who sat on the Foreign Relations Committee and everything else for years.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, that's where McCain has a big strength. You see, Giuliani can be picked apart by the other candidates in the race once this gets going, and that's why the money is sort of sliding over to McCain. If McCain falls apart, if McCain comes out and he's horrible, then Giuliani's going to be right there to pick it up.
It'll be interesting to see how far Mitt Romney goes, because I've said for a while now governors tend to do better in presidential races than senators, not to mention the fact that, and this goes the same for Obama and Hillary, more so for Hillary, and that in the sense of when you've been in the Senate for a very long time, you have an awful lot of crap on you.
Yeah.
And it's hard to wipe that crap off, especially, I think many Americans like, decisive individual leadership versus people who rule by consensus, which you have to do in order to live in the Senate.
Yeah. Yeah,
so
Hillary by nature is
Romney capitalizes on
Hillary's a very nuanced consensus politician. And I'm not so sure how that's going to play even within the Democratic Party.
Well, I've written about
there's already a major
Hillary.
rebellion brewing in the Democratic Party against Hillary because a lot of us feel we're getting Hillary shoved down our throats when we'd really have, we think Obama or Edwards could win.
Well, let me ask you a question. You say we, but who do you, and this was when we moved away from the radio topic, what I wanted to ask you is who I know my dream candidacy is Newt versus Gore. But neither one of them are running. And so I like Giuliani on the GOP side. I like Huckabee. McCain, I'm not so fond of. On the other side, I'd like to see Obama run. I'd like to see him make it just for the sheer novelty of it all. Outside of that, there aren't too many people I like who are running as Democrats. What's your dream, and then who do you like?
I think the dream winning ticket out of these fields would probably be some combination of Obama and Edwards. That'd be a winning ticket. As far as a handicapper, what do I think is going to happen? Barring some sort of major Democratic popular insurrection, which, as we know, the party's famous for, rebelling against its own establishment. If that does not happen, Hillary Clinton's probably going to win this nomination. She's just they're talking about her fundraising machine as being colossal and bigger than George W. Bush's.
Does that take into account that I think it was Obama who just peeled off Hollywood and the George Soros faction?
Well, Hillary is just so far embedded in so many areas. That's the thing. She doesn't rely on one group. She has corporate America sponsorship. She has union education. She's everywhere. I mean, Obama's going to be a credible number two. But, I mean, with the way the Clintons, and I hate this term, with the way the Clintons are making Obama work for the black vote, which is like the black water fountain and, the black entrance, but the way they're making him work for the African-American vote, it's going to be really tough for him to overcome that. There's just this rock star cliche about a Clinton, much like a Bush. that draws a lot of people to the
strikes me
name.
as the Howard Dean of the Democrat Party this time around, in the sense that, Howard Dean was the uncrowned nominee up until he hit Iowa, and then proceeded to blow up.
Oh, the possible uncrowned nominee this time around for the Democrats might be John Edwards. I mean, he has a great grassroots organization in place. He can raise lots of money, but by the time it's all said and done, he might be an also-ran.
Well, let me ask you a question. Do you not think that he has way too much crap on him from, having sat at the table with Kerry?
Oh, no, because a lot of Democrats wanted to see that ticket flip-flopped.
Oh, really?
Yeah. There's actually been a widespread belief that if the ticket was flip-flopped, the Democrats would have won in 2004.
It's funny, one of the fans of this show who calls in periodically and sends me lots of emails is a huge fan of John Edwards, and I think is doing some work for his campaign and such. And I know she'd like to see him be the nominee this time and run. My problem with John Edwards was, and I liked him in the debates, and I think that I think he should be given a post if the Democrats, God forbid, actually win in 2008. I think working in the cabinet someplace would be good for John Edwards.
Yeah.
But my problem with him was, and this is where I'm kind of a pragmatist, he had all these wonderful ideas, all these social ideas that he'd like to enact, which would require tremendous amounts of tax increases.
And that's what stops a lot of Democrats from voting for him. I mean,
exactly.
Because the Democrats, as you know, are the party of the balanced budget now. Mm-hmm. And they start looking at Edwards' proposals and they start scratching their heads and going, wait a minute, we can't pay for this.
Exactly. That was my thing. I mean, as much as, God, it was funny because actually Sharpton a lot of the times echoed exactly what Edwards was proposing, just not so eloquently. And
Sharpton's a great piece of work.
I love Sharpton.
They should let him run in every election for both or any party.
Between him and Kucinich, they made those debates. I mean, they were like the antithesis to Gephardt.
Well, they had nothing to lose. They had absolutely nothing to lose. They could just lobby grenades at the big guys all hour long.
Yeah, that's kind of what I'm hoping Brownback does this time around for the Republicans.
Well, Brownback actually, ideologically, would be a formidable Republican, but he's just trapped in a field this year where there's two big monsters, and there's not a lot of pie left for the other people.
No.
I mean, Huckabee. I like Huckabee. I think Huckabee is the kind of candidate, and actually Giuliani. That's the way the Republican Party should be moving. Mm-hmm. The Republican Party should be moving out of the far right slot, kind of more to the middle again.
Well, I'll tell you, I don't see where the evangelicals get any of what they want anytime they do. I mean, they had their man.
I've written about this constantly, and yet as soon as somebody starts speaking their language, they fall into line and vote. They're getting played by their own party.
Well,
much like the Democrats have done to unions.
They've had George Bush now for about 7 years. Has the man overturned abortion? No. Has the man...
Well, Alito was sort of his gift to the social conservatives.
We just got an instant message from Reverend John. It says, I lost the call-in number, but please let everyone know I'm drunk in a classy hotel and that I said, BUCGAW!
Oh, he's only like 25 minutes late, but he got it in.
Exactly. There's no thing with the show about things running on time. We just do whatever.
This is sort of like Amtrak.
Well, the Soviet Union, whatever you like.
Yeah, there's a 5-year plan for the radio show.
So before I let you go, we are running towards the end of the show here, but I wanted to ask you, what is new in store for the 411 politics zone? I know I took the ball and decided to submit a Wednesday news column called 7 Continents in 7 Minutes.
Yes, thank you. So I no longer have to write a Wednesday news column. I really enjoy having my Tuesdays and Wednesdays back off again. The Wednesday, we still need a Wednesday news column. The problem we have in the politics zone essentially is when I took over, we had maybe 5 writers, and now we have 15 or more contributors. But we only have a few openings, and they're getting hard to fill. Now, what's coming up, hopefully, is we're going to boost the number of writers up to the point where we have 4 columns a day running. The podcast idea is coming. I already have approval from our boss, and he said it's okay to do the podcast for the zone. Now it's a matter of working out how that's going to actually transpire.
Tell everyone what you mean by the podcast zone. What exactly is this?
We're gonna hopefully, as I think I wrote to you, we're gonna hopefully be able to have some of our writers do podcasts, and we're gonna put them on for Romania. And if we have enough, I think maybe I'll have to beg, but we can get our own little separate podcast section.
That'll be good. Now it'll be 401 Mania.
We're just expanding into another platform. I mean, Ashish's only condition, our boss, was that we don't replace columns with podcasts.
Mm-hmm.
As long as we use them as supplementary material, we're good to go.
Okay.
Which our bread and butter is the written word. There's no way we're going to.
Does Ashish share with you the numbers for
I knew that was coming.
I'm curious.
I only get that question about every 2 hours. No.
I don't want to go on record as saying that's the first time I've ever asked about it.
Oh, yeah, it's the first time you've ever asked it. Yeah, he doesn't share the exact numbers because the philosophy of the whole site is he doesn't want to spur competition between readers, or between writers. But I do have a general idea of who's where, and I do know the top 2 columns in the zone.
Okay.
Yeah, I don't have exact numbers, and frankly, I don't want to have exact numbers.
You said which ones were the 2 top?
Whatever. It's blah, 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 and da-da-da-da.
Gotcha.
I'm not going
to
blurt that out either. But, and as far as I know Brandon Crow is listening. Go write a column. Yeah, he's listening to hear his name.
Hi. Oh, hey, Brandon Crow. How are you?
So we have to say Brandon Crow.
Brandon Crow, author of The Murmur of the Crow.
Yeah, Brandon Crow of the once popular column when it actually ran on time, Murmur of Crow.
I see.
He'll understand the joke. But that's basically the podcasts are coming up. We're going to do more expansion, and book reviews are coming up.
Yes,
that's in the immediate future. Long term, there could be some major expansion as we get later in the year.
What are you thinking of?
I want more international coverage. I've told you for the last year I've wanted more international coverage. I would actually love to have an international subsection within the politics page.
Now you just got to get people. I mean, that was one of the things that I mentioned to Brandon when we did the Heineken dialogues, was that we're so domestic focused. that there's a whole other world out there, and the only time it ever gets mentioned
we're so domestically focused, and that's a big problem, is a lot of our readership comes from Europe. A lot of our readership, it basically mirrors the WWE broadcast pattern, where wrestling is strong, since defense wrestling is still the bread and butter of this site. That's where a lot of our readership comes from.
Mm-hmm.
So I don't know, you've probably gotten email from all around the world, but I get emailed from the UK, from Israel. It just seems sad that we can't offer to those people more coverage of the rest of the world.
Yeah, I know that my first running of the 7 continents in 7 minutes actually got
a format, which, by the way, you came up with all on your own.
Yes. Was somebody had written to me that was like, wow, this is, I can't wait to see what you come up with next. You're really hitting some far out stuff there. And that was the whole point of it.
Yeah.
Because I read it as a fan, just like I listen to my show as a fan, and I read the 401 stuff as a fan. I'm like, well, what would I want out of this network? That's kind of how I approach it. I approach it with my 2 hats. I approach it as a reader, and I approach it as a writer, and then as an editor. Actually, 3 hats. I really look at it all different ways, and I see that glaring need. My background is in public administration and public policy. I'm a domestic policy guy. Mm-hmm.
So I'm going to go naturally where it feels comfortable.
Right.
In my columns. And the other stuff, being that most of our writers are here in the U.S., we get just a lot of Americentric coverage. But yeah, we really do need to expand. Even 2 more international columns a week would be great. So that's going to be the goal. It's easy to say, but hard to find quality writers that can submit on a deadline.
I love the help wanted things that you guys post, and then this is why I'm going to ask you this question.
I post them everywhere, by the way.
What kind of submissions do you get?
What's that? How many do I get? It all depends. Submissions. The first time we did it, we got 7 submissions.
Mm-hmm.
It's been the next time we did it, we got 12. It all depends. Now we're in the 20s and 30s.
Mm-hmm. And what's the quality?
How many quality? Actual quality that somebody just didn't type me an email and send it in, which I think a lot of people believe is what you do.
Mm-hmm.
You just type up whatever's on your mind and send it in. Quality, I would say maybe 10% of what we get.
Wow.
I have to wade through them all.
Mm-hmm.
I sit there and read them all 2, 3, 4 times.
And
some of them get and if it's full of historical mistakes and an absolute lack of proofreading, it gets 1 reading. Because if you can't at least proofread your sample, I can't take the time to fix it for you, and at least you can do is proofread.
Mm-hmm.
It would be nice to me. Proofread before you send me something.
I will say this, and this does go back to our discussion of Air America. If someone's just going to write a rant, I'm angry and here's why, and this is why this person sucks, and I'm not interested.
Yeah, I mean that's what the one thing I keep preaching to all potential writers is there has to be context. I mean I'm as you know if you've ever read my column, I'm a fact-based person. And
I only read the plug for me. Now go ahead.
What's that? Oh yeah, I know.
Why
do you think that plug section is as long as this? That's the only time you guys ever read my column. See if you're mentioned. I know that's what you all are doing.
Exactly.
But no, you all scroll through the 1,000 words of news and go right to the good stuff.
Exactly. Name, words, Mark, got it.
God, there it is. I know it. Why do you put me on the bottom this week? Which I get emails. If I ever forget to plug somebody, I get emails about that because everyone takes it personally like they've done something wrong. So I have to make sure I don't forget anyone. But no, well, actually, I forgot what you were talking about. What were we? What
submissions.
Was the question? Submissions. What was it about submissions? Because we went over blah blah blah. What about submissions? Come on, Mark. You're the host. You're supposed to keep me on. You're supposed to keep me on message.
We were talking about ranting.
Proofreading.
Yes, and people sending in essentially just rants about politics.
Oh, just rants. Yeah, I mean, there has to be some sort of factual context. Every column you read here voices a strong opinion, but you can't assume that your opinion is more. Why is your opinion mean more than somebody else's?
Right. I seldom agree with either Joe Rivet or another.
Now that surprises me because I don't think why you would disagree with Joe.
There were a lot of columns that Joe has written, and anything from like the minimum wage thing to stuff he's written on Bush. I'm just going, meh. I don't agree, but he writes a well thought out column. Same thing with Crow. His last one about
probably
closing
his best
down the
one.
war.
It's probably his best one in about 6 months.
Yeah, and again, I disagreed with half of it, but that doesn't say that. That it wasn't a great column.
Yeah, I mean, it's just to me, being that I write a news column, I would say 90% of what's in that column is fact-based, and my own politics get about a paragraph in each news story, and the rest of it's just the straight news. Now, if I was writing an opinion column, it would have a totally different feel. But for an opinion column, you can't just come in and voice an opinion. You have to let us know why.
And I know for myself, I play on the fact that I'm a social worker. And
play on the fact. You don't pull from your experience as a social worker. You manipulate it.
Exactly. But my point being is that I think anybody can write a column about why Bush sucks or why he's wonderful. But I think you need to be a human being. And, there's about 1 million. This is what I've said about the blogosphere. 1,000,000,001 people out there all stating their opinion. What makes yours any more special than the next guy's? Yeah,
and I mean, to be honest, our last, we've had a couple writers, like Justin came straight from blogging. I actually came straight from blogging when I came at 401. And Audrey Teagan, the newest one, came straight from blogging. But you have to look at those bloggers and see something in there as an editor. They can't just be the standard, this is how I feel.
Right, and again, something I mentioned in the Heineken dialogues is not just the international stuff, but there's a whole world of news out there.
Which is what I feel bad about. I only have 2 days a week, and I'm always cutting off stories, which is why I'm always writing somewhere else at the same time.
Right.
I'm always posting things in other places just because there are stories that get cut almost every week.
Mm-hmm.
I'll start out with 4 or 5 stories that I want to do, and then I'll shape it down to the 1 or 2, and a lot of that comes into what you guys cover that week.
Right, and this show works much the same way, and that is, we plan for 3 major topics, the BUCGAW report, and then
sort of the trademark and staple of the show.
Exactly, and then the intro and some shtick at the end. And a lot of times we have to cut stuff, or I won't include things that I think would beat to death in the news. Like I'm not going to do Nancy Pelosi's Blink Fest from the State of the Union.
Yeah, whenever it's already been done.
Point?
Yeah. Well, yeah. I mean, I don't watch a lot of TV news. I mean, for the same reason I don't listen to a lot of talk radio is that a lot of it just screams at you. You don't learn a lot.
No, and that's this show or anything else is just something that I'm very mindful of, and that is respect your audience by not screaming at them or assuming that they're idiots. And what is
Instead, we just clock at them for 7 to 10 minutes.
Exactly. Everyone likes a good chicken sound. Listen, I want to thank you for being on the show today.
You're welcome. Anytime you ever need me back on again, let me know.
Will do. And that, folks, is the end of the show. Reverend John will be with us next week. We will be talking about Mitt Romney and his goal to become president, what he's bringing to the table. I told you we were going to be doing some analysis of each candidate, the pros and cons. So next up on the slate is Mitt Romney and, of course, the BUCGAW report, as well as a number of other issues. So see you next time, 12:30 Eastern Standard Time, Sunday. This has been Progressive Conservatism Live.